Nice. I have more than 1,000 subscribers now. 1,000 subscribers! Nice. Thanks for that. And to celebrate, I'm gonna make the video that was most requested. And that is talking about all the effects of the RC-505. The reason why it took me so long to do this is because I never feel ready to do it. Like, with the effects, there is just so much that you can do with them and how you can combine them that it can never fit into one video. So today, we're just gonna be doing the very basics. And we're gonna focus on how the effects actually work and not so much on how you can use them. Because again, there are so many ways in which you can use them. And it also depends on what you're using the loop station with. If you're doing beatbox or just using the voice, or if you have a guitar or other instruments, that all makes a difference. So we're keeping it simple, just the very basics. I want you to understand what the effects actually do, because I think that then you will be able to figure out your own use cases and be creative with the effects by yourself and not just copy what other people are doing. Of course, it's also a nice strategy, but I think understanding is more important. So let's get this party started. Yeah, look here. Hello and welcome to the loop station view. Let me just reset the storage, just so we're working on the same thing, but branding is important. Alright, let's get this party started. First things first, we are working on an RC-505 in version 2.0, which means it has such cool things as multi-input and multi-track effects. That's what we're gonna be using. I just like being able to use multiple effects at the same time, but I won't be talking about that in this video. I just want to use these settings because it means that you can't have all the effects on all of the channels. So some effects are just on A, some effects are just on C, and some effects on C are restricted if you're using a particular effect on A. But you can look all of that up in the user manual, and I'm gonna be talking more about that in part 2 of this series. First, some very basics: selecting input effects, those 3 buttons, selecting track effects, those 3 buttons. Each effect has settings. You can access those by selecting the effect, and then you will be in the effect settings, and by using the arrow keys you can see the settings and then change them by using this knob. For each effect, one particular setting is also controlled by the main knob. In the case of the filter, it is the cutoff. If I turn the main knob, it will change this particular setting. I can also change it with this knob. This knob will always change the current setting. This knob will always get it to the position where it is, unless you have selected the one setting that I talked about in my settings video, but we're not gonna go into detail there. Okay, another thing that might be interesting to know about this knob is that it has dead spaces here where I can move it and it doesn't change the settings. As soon as I get above a certain threshold, it will change. Then it has some dead space again in the middle. Here I can move it without it changing, and it continues. And some dead space in the end again. This is all about usability, but just so you're aware that this is a thing, because if you want a smooth transition, then you have a little bit of leap time here in the middle. Alright, so let's start with the first effect I want to be talking about today. Can be found on the C effect on the very right. That's also sometimes good to know where amongst this list an effect is, because if I know it's on the very right, I can be like, woo, all the way, and here we are. For B, there will be the chorus. Anyhow, reverb. What does reverb do? It adds the feeling as if you're in a bigger room. I don't think I really need to explain this effect. I mean, you can hear it. But I do want to explain the settings of that effect. So very conveniently, the first setting, time, has a unit, seconds. So it's pretty obvious what this does. It changes the length of the reverb to those 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, right? And if I put it higher, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, seconds of reverb. And it goes up to 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. I counted a bit fast. Anyhow, if you just want to add a little bit of reverb to your entire song, then low values like this work great. But I usually do that with the global reverb. And this reverb I just use on the default, like around 3 seconds. There are two more settings in the reverb. The one is the effect level. Level always being the loudness, the amount of how much it is applied, right? So how much the effect is applied. So let's see the reverb. The effect level, by the way, is changed by the effect knob. So as you can hear, the higher I set it, the louder the effect is. Alright? That's the effect level. I can turn it to 0, then I don't have any effect. So I can select it, unselect it, does not make any difference. Now, we can turn it back up. And then we have a look at the direct level. So D stands for direct. That is the input that the effect takes. So in this case, it's the microphone input. And if I use the effect, I can turn down the direct level and just have the reverb. Now you just hear the reverb, the original input is gone. Might be hard to understand, but there you go. This is important terminology. We will be getting back to that later. Direct level and effect level. Getting this back up to normal. What is a typical use case for a reverb? Well, if you're just singing, it just makes it sound a bit more, just gives it a nicer flair, right? Another use case for the reverb would be to end a song with a nice fade out. So this is the end of my song. And then it ends. Another use case would be to use the reverb for making a nicer snare, so having a nice attack on the snare. I've seen a lot of beatboxers do that. The way it works, you have the reverb, but you don't use it, and then when you do a snare, like, you hit up the reverb, like, and that makes it sound a lot nicer. But again, I don't want to spend too much time talking about how you use the effects, because I want to leave that up to you for now to figure out how you want to use them. I just want to explain how they work. Right, so with that, we go to the next effect. Next effect I want to be talking about is the panning. So what panning is, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. It changes to the left and the right audio channel. Because we have stereo output, we have two channels, left and right, and the panning, switches between them. And it does so automatically if you have the type auto selected. There are two types, auto 1 and auto 2. The difference being that auto 2 is a lot more aggressive in pushing it back and forth. Auto 1 has a nicer, smoother transition. Now, I want to be talking about the rate, because that's something that we find a lot in the settings of effects. In general, there is always an absolute section down here, and then once you go further up, in this case above the 100, you will find relative values. Those are relative to your tempo. 4 measurements in that case. One of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a measurement. So if I were to apply the effect with one measurement, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Get it? I think that's obvious, right? If I go further, I will have half a measurement, a fourth, so one note, right? And so on, an eighth, a 16th, and a 32nd. Yeah. Right. I think you get this, right? This is quite obvious. I always like to have relative values because it just adds rhythm. But while we're at the rate, maybe we should have a discussion about this absolute value here. It doesn't have a unit, so we don't really know what this is. Maybe the user manual can help us out. Oh, it can't? Alright. But I went through the trouble of trying to measure it, and it seems like this is a logarithmic scale, with 0, of course, having it all on the one side always. And according to my measurements, 1 is a 16-second time frame. For the 100, I measured like 1/16th of a second. To better showcase this, let's first talk about the depth. The depth of this effect defines how tough it actually is, right? So with 100, it really jumps from the left to the right. And obviously at 0, it does nothing. Right? Now you can see down here where you see what you hear, what this effect actually does to the channels. And maybe also the difference between auto 1 and auto 2. So, talking about the rate again, according to my measurements, 50 is approximately 0.6 seconds. More interesting is the 40, which comes in at 1 second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's approximately 1 second. It goes up to approximately 1/16th of a second for... okay. But again, I prefer to have relative notes. Yes. Okay. There is only one more thing that we need to talk about, and that is the step rate. If the step rate is off, that means it's treated as an analog signal. Everything is used. If I set the step rate to 0, then it will only track the signal once, and the audio signal will be on the left, as we see. And it will stay on the left only. Now, if we set it again to 1, then this is the same kind of thing, and I prefer to use the relative values. Now, the step rate is the timing in which it checks when it should have another value, right? So if it's off, it continuously checks. Here it checks 32 times per measure and 16 times, and here it only checks 8 times. And since this is the exact same value as my rate, it will always check once. If the step rate is the same as my rate, then it will have the same effect as if it's 0, because it only checks always the same point. There is a law that the step rate always needs to be at least twice the actual rate, so the highest frequency, such that you can track the signal. So in this case, now we get the proper signal, because we always check twice, so we all start. You get the idea. But it just checks twice. There are just 2 values. Even if we use auto 1, there's no nice transition anymore, because the step rate is only twice the rate. I will be talking a little bit more about step rate at the filter, which is coming up soon. But for now, we still need to check out one thing that the panning has as a type, and that is manual. Manual is my favorite way to use panning, because I can say, do I want it left? Do I want it right? And I can just use this main knob to change that. We then only have one additional setting, and that is the position, which can be changed by the main knob or this, of course. Let's quickly talk about use cases for the panning effect. I mean, the auto setting, of course, pushing it left and right to create a bit more of a stereo feeling, just to have that as an effect. You can apply that to any song and see how it works for you. What I really like to do, I can, for instance, record a bass line on like one side. And another instrument somewhere else, and still just use one track. I also really like to use the panning to sing the same thing twice, but once on the left and once on the right. Let me demonstrate. I sing the same thing on the left and right. I sing the same thing on the left and right. Because even though I'm singing the same thing, it doesn't actually mean that I'm singing the same thing. I always sing it a little bit differently. So it just sounds nicer than if you say, I sing the same thing on the center, I sing the same thing on the left and right. Sounds better, right? But that's enough for the panning. Let's continue. The next effect I want to be talking about is the delay. Now, the delay, as you hear, it adds a kind of echo. Again, very nicely, we have a time with an actual unit. We have the milliseconds. We can turn it up to 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. So the time from when I say something to when the repetition comes, the echo, is 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Once we pass that 1 second mark, we can get to the relative values again, and the maximum here is half a measure. 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 Of course, this applies to the tempo, so if I change the tempo, it changes the delay. 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 Make sense? Make sense? Make sense? Make sense? So that's the time. What else have we here? The feedback. The feedback defines how much of the previous echo is in the next echo. This can be interpreted as a percentage. If I get that up to 50%, then the echo will last longer. And if I push it all the way up to 100, then it will never stop. 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 This would just continue forever until I turn it down. On 0, I would just have 1 repetition, and that's it. E.Level, we already know what this is. The effect level. If I put it up, it's louder. Wow, if I put it down, it disappears. And with that, I can define how loud the first echo is. You smart, you get it. Okay, and that's the demonstration of the delay. Now, what can you use this for? You can use it to sing with yourself. I sing with myself. I sing with myself. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Delay can also be very cool if you're picking the guitar strings. I don't have a guitar right here. I'm not a guitar. But you get the idea. And the delay is also what the people in those kind of amusement parks use. You know, the, are you ready for another round? You get the idea. And that's been the delay. And now that we talked about panning and delay, let's talk about panning delay. Which is basically the exact same thing as the delay, just that it will pan between echoes from the left channel to the right channel. Let me demonstrate. Exact same thing again. All the settings are the same. Timing, feedback, and effect level. Boing, 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 boing. It will always start on the left channel, then go to the right, left, right, left, right. Yeah. You get it? Simple! And that's the panning delay. Ha! Done! That was the quickest. Panning delay basically combines the two advantages of the panning and the delay, so you can have a nice full sound. Nice stereo and also repetitive kind of vibe. Next thing I want to be talking about to you is the EQ. It's super simple and yet so powerful. Basically, what it does, it amplifies, or what's the opposite of amplify? You can make stuff louder and more quiet. Yes, you get it? There are 4 frequency bands that you can change. The low frequencies, the mid-lows, the mid-highs, and the highs. Pretty obvious. If you boost the low frequencies, then it sounds all a bit deeper. You can also take out the low frequencies. Then you can do the same with the mids. Take them out, leave them in. High mids, amplify them. Making it sound like an old microphone. Or taking them completely out. removing most of my voice. And then the high frequencies, you can make them annoyingly loud or take them out completely. Well, almost completely. Then there's the level, which is controlled by the main knob. And the level is just the overall amplification. So basically you can use the knob as a fader, like those ones, just that you can apply it to as many tracks as you want, right? Now maybe let's talk about what those bands actually are, which frequencies those bands actually are, and maybe we can find information about that in the user manual. Oh, no we can't. The user manual is again so helpful. So I had to figure it out myself, and according to my measurements, the low frequencies are up to 100 Hertz, the low mids are 100 to about 1000, the high mids are 1000 to 4K, and then everything above 4K falls under the high frequency spectrum. Let's actually look at frequencies. As you can now see down here, we not only have the current wavelet, we also have the frequency spectrum of what you can hear. And this is gonna be important when talking about the next effect. Let's talk about the filter. Let's have a look at the settings. There are 3 types of filters: low pass filters, band pass filters, and high pass filters. But since I'm a shitty animator, I brought some paper. So a low pass filter, as the name would suggest, lets the low frequencies pass and the high frequencies are removed. The high pass filter is the opposite. The low frequencies are filtered and the high frequencies can pass. And then there's the band pass filter, and at the band pass filter you have a certain frequency band that can pass, and everything above and below is filtered. Finally, my college education is good for something. Can you even see that? Yeah, now you can see that. It's just otherwise too dark. The type selects which type of filter we're using. Now, in order to properly explain stuff, let me just remove this rate and this resonance. Let's first talk about the cutoff. And since I want to be able to talk unaffectedly, I will use track effects filter. And then I need to record something on a track, and I will just record some nice noise which has all the frequencies. Oh, is that annoying. But as you can see in the frequency spectrum, most of the frequencies are active. Yeah. Now let's play with this filter, shall we? First I want to be talking about the cutoff. Now if we have a nice low pass filter, if we turn it all the way to the right, if the cutoff is 100, basically what we're doing is changing this point. This is my cutoff point. So I can change it further down to remove more of the high frequencies. Makes sense? Cool. If we have a high pass filter, it goes from the other way around. It goes from here. So from 0 is where all the frequencies are in. And if I move up, the low frequencies are removed. Very nice and visible in the frequency spectrum. Let's also have a look at the band pass, starting with just low frequencies and then getting higher. Such that you can see, I'm going to show you the cutoff. And here you can also see what I meant with it has dead space in the middle. Here, the 50, it stays longer at the 50. Okay, got it? Sweet! There's another thing called the resonance. Basically, what the resonance does, it amplifies the frequencies around the cutoff frequency. So, my amazing drawing skills, it will do something like this, right? And the more resonance, the more it will amplify those frequencies. Let me give you an example. So, let's use the low pass filter and turn the cutoff a little higher. And then increase the resonance. At some point, the resonance will be high enough that the filter becomes self-oscillating. And then you will just have this frequency basically. And once you've understood that we can change this one note with the cutoff, because it's basically just our cutoff frequency that we're hearing, I can explain other stuff to you. Now we can be talking about the rate. Guess what? The rate once again has some value here, and then it becomes the relative values that relate to your tempo. But let's start with our nice, simple tone. Now, what does the rate do? The rate does what we earlier did by ourselves by moving the cutoff frequency. And the higher the rate, the quicker it will do it. And once we reach the 100, if we go over that, it will go to our relative values again. Doesn't that look nice in the frequency spectrum? That's the rate. Now we can talk about the depth. The depth basically just defines how much this change. So there's one point where it can't change further, so it will stop there. Alright, the only thing we still need to be talking about is the step rate. And since we have the frequency spectrum here, I can explain it better to you. Now, with step rate off, it's a continuous signal. If I set it to 0, then there will just be one value that it takes, and that's it. Let's go to the relative values. Holy shit, is that annoying. It's the same as if I use the same step rate as I have rate, one value. As soon as I have double the step rate, I have two of those values, right? It steps up and down because it only checks the signal for when it should change twice per rate. And then we can continue this game. Then it checks it 4 times per rate. And here in the frequency spectrum, you really nicely see how this becomes a discrete signal where you have those steps. I hope the step rate makes sense now. If not, let me know and I'll try to explain it in a separate video, because holy shit is this video long. Now, such a filter really can be used for many purposes. One could be to just have a low pass filter to have a nicer kick, like, you know, instead of you'll have, and that just sounds nicer, right? Another way to use a filter is using a high pass filter to prepare for a drop, for instance. Yeah, so filters can be used in very different ways. Again, I'm just trying to give you the tools to understand what it does, and then you figure out how to best use it for yourself. Moving on! While we are talking about frequencies and stuff, the next thing that I want to talk about is the isolator. So basically, what it does, it isolates sound. Woo! Well, actually, it isolates frequencies. Now, in this case, we have 3 bands, the low, the mid, and the high band. Again, since our user manual will not be super helpful here, I tried to figure out what that actually means. The low band is around 100 Hertz. The mid band I measured around 1.2K, and the high anything above like 6K. Let's see what it actually does by having a look at the frequency of our nice annoying noise. The rate is 1 measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can already hear, it takes out those high frequencies and then it gives them in again. So it isolates them. Then we can do the same thing with mids. Or low frequencies. Wonderfully nice, as you can see in the frequency spectrum. You see exactly what it does. But now you might expect that if you have 3 isolators with 1 band each, that you would isolate all the frequencies. That's not technically true. Let's have a look at it. You kind of get what you expect, but there are still frequencies in the middle between the bands that it lets through. Now that we saw what it does approximately, let's have a closer look at what the settings are. Rate we already discussed. You can set it to one of those absolute values, or you go up to the relative values, obviously. It has the behavior that you would expect. Then depth. Depth is the amount of how much it should isolate. So if I set it to 0, it does nothing. But the higher I set this value, the more it will take out those frequencies. And then we have the same thing again with the step rate. Once again, to demonstrate. Interestingly, in this case, having the step rate off is the same as having twice the rate as a step rate, because step rate off just takes the values on and off. If I have the same rate as step rate, it does nothing. If I have twice, it does the same as if it's off. But then as soon as I go quicker, it will have a smoother transition between those. That's just one of the many things that you need to know if you want to understand what's happening. So yeah, it's not all that simple. But that's why I'm making this video, right? The last setting of the isolator is the band level. You can select how loud the band should be overall. So if you set it to 0, then it will always be as if those frequencies are removed. Or in other words, you can select the isolator effect like this. Because it will always take out those frequencies. So if the band level is already 0, then it doesn't have anything to take out the frequencies for. And then the whole rate and everything doesn't really make sense anymore. This is just if you want to, you know, like with the EQ, dampen those particular frequencies overall. You could set the rate to 0 and then we would just do that. Then it would just basically do the same thing as an EQ. Right! That's the isolator. I hope that it made sense. Moving on. Let's say goodbye to this. The next effect that I want to be talking about. One of my favorite effects. Guitar to bass. It only has one setting, and that's also what is controlled by the effect knob. And that's balance. Basically what this is the direct level to the effect level. Here I have 50-50. So you hear the input from the microphone and the guitar to bass effect. If I put it like this, I have direct level of 100, so it's louder, but none of the effect. So I can turn it off and on, and it doesn't make a difference. And then on the other extreme, I just have the effect here. Talking about what the effect actually does, this is more magic to me. What it's intended to from the name is if you have a guitar, you play with it, then it pretends that you're playing a bass. So for individual notes that you're playing, if you're picking, it will make them sound like a bass. So basically, it's an octaver, but it's not really an octaver. It does make the sound more low, yes, but there's more magic to it. And this additional magic allows it to sound pretty nice, and that's why I'm using this effect mainly for doing my bass lines. Da 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 da. It also works on vocals. You don't actually need to have a guitar to use this effect. But in order to see what it actually does, let's have just one note. Now I have a high-pitched sound. That is super annoying. But it's okay, because I wanna be using the effect on it. We can see that it's basically just lowering the frequency of it. Guitar to bass is just one of my absolute favorite effects on the RC-505. Just play around with it, have some fun with it. You'll see what you can do. And before we get ourselves into too much detail here, I want to continue to the next effect, which is similar. It's the octaver. As you can already hear, what it does, similar to guitar to bass, it takes the input and it adds some low frequencies. But the difference to the guitar to bass is that it does not remove the direct input, it just adds an effect. You have the possibility of adding the 1 octave below, so that's -1 octave. It's not 10 CT, whatever that would mean. Or you can even go lower and add 2 octaves below. That maybe makes sense if you have very high pitched things. Or you can go crazy and do both. As for the other settings, octaval level, that's basically effect level, since octaver is our effect. We can put it to 100, that makes it the loudest. We can completely remove it to 0. So yes, pretty self-explanatory. And that's already literally it. That's all the settings you have for the octaver. Having a look at our nice annoying high frequency, applying an octaver. It is similar to guitar to bass, right? That's the octaver. Now, while we're talking about effects that change the pitch, let's talk about the next thing, which is the pitch bend. On first glance, it might sound similar to the octaver, just that the direct level is 0, right? So what I put in is removed and the pitch is changed. It is bent to a different pitch. For instance, I can bend it to -1 octave. If I put it all the way here, it's -1 octave. And here we already see what the difference is. I can actually select the frequencies between my maximum bend. So from 0, I can bend it all the way down to 1 octave. Or, if I want to go more crazy, I can change it to -2 octaves. And then I could go all the way down. And it even works until -3 octaves. Basically what this does, it changes how much I bend by moving this fader. So bend it a lot. If you want to have a look at pitch bend on our one note, that's how it works. And with pitch bend, I can not only go lower, I can also go higher. And I can even go super crazy and go up to +4 octaves. So all the fucking... Hey, whoa. You can do a lot of fun stuff with the pitch bend. Making those kind of robotic kind of sounding sounds. Or just suspending the pitch a little bit. Changing the octave with pitch bend, it's a cool effect, yes, but using it to create a bass line, I don't know, it just doesn't sound as nice as if I was to use guitar to bass. The guitar to bass just has a nicer, fuller sound that just, I don't know what magic it does, but it does some magic that all the pitch bending, just the frequency changing effects don't have. Pitch bend definitely has some nice use cases, and I hope you understand what pitch bend does. There's one more effect that changes the pitch. It's right left from the pitch bend, and it's transpose. What transpose does is pretty similar to pitch bend, just that it changes the pitch in a very discrete sense, and that is in semitones. So in the middle, I have the 0. Then I can transpose it upwards a semitone,
or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, or 7, or 8, or 9, or 10, or 11, or 12. And at 12 we have the octave.
And the same thing, of course, also works the other way around. I can transpose it down all the way to -12, where I have -1 octave, which sounds familiar. It was the same thing that we had before at the pitch bend. Transpose, although doing similar things, has kind of different use cases, because you wouldn't transpose like this. One thing that I saw, Marc French names. You know, that one YouTuber that does a lot of loop station stuff. One way he uses it is to make male and female voices.
So this is a more male voice.
And this is a more female voice.
And then you can, of course, also use it to transpose your whole song to get in a different key. Key change. Yeah, something like that. You can just do a long note like do, 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 and then transpose it to kind of create a melody. A lot of stuff that you can do with all of those effects. Shouldn't be that hard to understand. Which means we can move on to the next effect. Next effect. Yeah. It's on the very right, and it's the chorus. Chorus is actually related to the pitch bending, but it does it on a way smaller scale. So just a little bit. It's as if you sing the same thing several times. So for instance, this is my chorus, this is my chorus, this is my chorus. Sounds somewhat similar to this is my chorus. You see what I mean? Kinda, right? Because in a chorus, usually a lot of people sing it or more instruments play it. And because each of the instruments or each of the voices is a little bit different, you get this little bit of additional information, right? That's what this effect simulates. Yes, so let's have a look what the chorus has for us. So we can change the rate. As you can maybe already hear, maybe you can hear it better if I put the depth higher. The depth, again, changes how much it oscillates the pitch change. If I have a higher depth, then the pitch is bent more. And then the rate suggests how quickly it changes, right? So do. Make sense? I think that makes sense. And then, once again, the effect level, we can add more of the chorus, or we can completely remove the chorus. There we go. That's what this setting is for. And that's already it for the chorus. What do you use the chorus for? Well, obviously for singing chorus. If you don't feel like singing the same thing, this is my chorus, several times. I sometimes also just sing with the chorus applied. Just maybe not with this sort of depth, but with a little bit lower, and then it just adds a little bit to my singing. This is a chorus, I sing a chorus, doesn't sound as lame as a verse, it's a chorus, oh yeah. I think you get it, and we can be moving on to the next effect. Slicer, yeah. As the name would suggest, the slicer slices the sound, and by that it takes out parts. Since it's easier to demonstrate this as a track effect, let's just add a do 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 do. So as you can see, the slicer takes out parts in a specific pattern. I'm gonna make a separate video of the 20 patterns of the slicer because I know that people want to hear all of them, but I don't want to make this video too long. Let's talk about depth, because here we have a depth of 100, which means it takes out the part it slices completely. You can go lower than that, then it still keeps a little bit of it in, right? If it's 0, it keeps all of it in, right? But you can go even further than the 100. And what the difference here is, it cuts sharper. So the attack is higher, right? It attacks more than if you just go to 100. It's a little bit softer. And as soon as you go down, you still hear what's below. That's the depth. I think we talked about rate enough that you understand what this means. If we had one measure, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. Alright, I think that this is enough for part 1. There will definitely be a part 2 and probably a part 3 because we only talked about a third of the effects so far. And I do want to talk about all the effects in a little bit of detail. I hope that what we talked about so far is understandable. See you in the next part. Yeah, alright. That's it. That was part 1. Subscribe for part 2. As I said, those effects are super versatile. You can use them in so many ways and combine them to create your own style of music. So you just need to try it out and figure out what works for you. And that was just an overview. For any of the effects, you can go more and more into depth. And there are resources out there. There are other creators that you can check out. Let me mention a few that I like. Enemy. He does beatboxing tutorials and also how to make beats and melodies with the loop station. Then there's Vision Elf. He reconstructs the songs of Saro, very famous loop station artist, and also does tutorials on the effects, like the granular delay I really liked. And as a third recommendation, last but not least, Arthur Henry. He does a lot of tutorials with the loop station. For instance, the whole thing with assigning stuff. I didn't even know that was possible until I watched his video. So yeah, you can check out those channels. All the links to stuff I mentioned will be in the description, or just look around on YouTube. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a like, why not? And also, just in case you have too much money, I do have a Patreon. Those videos are just a lot of effort to make, so any kind of support is highly appreciated. But of course you don't... But of course you don't have to. I don't want your money if you're like struggling with it, right? If you have any more questions to the effects I was talking about today, leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer them as good as I can. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff like that. And if there's anything that you want me to discuss really in depth, also let me know in the comments and I might be able to make another video about that. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Make your backup. And get yourself an RC-505. I should be sponsored by Boss. I'm not though, unfortunately. Anyone from Boss here? Alright, cool.